Look, all I'm saying is that I think Thraben Inspector is a little overrated.
J-Bro is right behind you.
Oh, hey, J-Bro.
Calm down, diddly 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 diddly. They did their best, shoddly iddly iddly diddly. Gotta be nice, hostility diddly biddly diddly.
Baneslayer bizzle bedizzles, bang bang bangs on the chicken wanks, the yucky ducky, Baral the buck buck, Pater Delver of Smelver, Pater bizzle bad dizzle, something something, bitter bizzle tokens, Ramanama the yum yums, Duretti spaghetti, Grizzle bedizzle, Mangle bedangle, Thready yum yums, Tangle dangle, Pater.
Ah, hell, diddly ding dong crap!
We normally don't swear on the show, but just like Ned Flanders, on this episode, we lost control, and there is going to be some cussing. Let's just make a podcast. Everyone ready? Great. Hello and welcome to Lucky Paper Radio. I am Andy, and I'm here with my co-host. I didn't think of a nickname for you, actually. I was too concerned with thinking of a nickname for these guys. I didn't think of a nickname for you. Anthony, temporarily reprieved of a nickname, Maddox.
At last, I'm free of this ridiculous bit.
You get to define yourself instead of me defining you.
That's, it's scary. I don't know what to do with it.
Well, I'll come back to you at the end of the episode to ask what nickname you chose for yourself, so you have the full conversation to decide.
See you then.
Great. I referenced these other guys in an abstract sense. This is our CubeCon tournament report review. I mean, I don't think it counts as an official tournament report, right? Maybe so. I don't know. But we're here with like a little over half of the squad that we drove to CubeCon with in a big old 12-passenger van. First up, we have, of course, Daniel Winchy Wheatley. You gotta take the microphone, otherwise no one can hear you.
Hey guys, how are you?
Closer.
How are you?
See
Closer.
this?
Yeah?
That's you. That's how
Oh
loud
my
you
god,
are.
I'm so quiet.
You should try and be as loud
What's
as
going on
everybody
here?
else. Yeah. So we don't know what Winchy Wheatley is?
No, I don't know. It just started being called that, and it was only one person. But
You
it was
said
really
Parker
fun.
made it up.
Parker made it up, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. I giggled at it, which is
a winch
permission.
is a winch anything other than like a cable you tow a car out of a ditch with? That's the only thing I know a winch to be.
I don't know any other winches.
I can see Theo like that's not the actual formal definition of a winch. Like I can tell he knows what's going on. We also have with us 3-0 Theo here. What's up, Theo?
Hello. It's good to be on the podcast.
Theo is the actual good Magic player of the group. It's very fun to have him kind of representing Baltimore, even though he's only here for a semester for his internship. We'll definitely claim you. I was talking to the CubeCon organizers about next year having like a city
Like a point tally.
yeah, point tally for different cities, and you'll probably be on New York next year, which doesn't help us. So
Yeah, I guess so. But
Bummer.
you guys have a whole crew here, so
we do have a lot of
Be on
people.
my own, I guess.
We have to get numbers. We have to get numbers.
There's
as
a
we're
pretty
gonna do
good New York contingent as well.
it. Yeah,
That's true.
big city turns out. And finally, we of course have Scumboi Patrick. What's up, Scumboi?
CubeCon! Good evening, everybody. Long time, first time. Great to be here.
So you didn't know that your actual username was going to be visible, and you have to like say it out loud to people all weekend.
I did not know that my username was going to be visible.
Do you
That's
think
correct.
Ebola Bukake knew that their username was going to be visible or not?
That's so funny that you say that because I was just about to bring up my good friend Ebola Bukake. Shout out to them.
Somebody had to say every round, like, I'm playing Ebola Bukake?
Mhm.
Not good.
Yeah, they told me. I'm sure I don't know. It was only me, but they told me that next year you're not going to have any choice.
No, they're just going to assign them.
Yeah, they said no more of that. Yeah.
Scumboi wasn't working for them. I thought it was a good name. What? I mean, I feel like you go buy dirt in different places. I feel like you embrace a Scumboi lifestyle.
Thank you. I'm doing my best.
Can't tell if you're actually happy about this.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I'm happy.
You chose Scumboi.
I'm
Yeah, it's
happy.
true.
I'm happy. This is my
It's
happy
true.
voice. I'm
Yeah.
happy. This is what happy looks like.
Yeah.
We're reviewing CubeCon. We drafted between us so many cubes. I don't even know how many cubes this weekend. Yeah, I guess let's just start with, I want to know what everybody's favorite cube they drafted was. I guess maybe starting with you, Anthony.
I mean, should we just talk about what CubeCon is? Or
I
does
guess. I mean, we
everybody
talked
know what
about it
that
so
is?
much in the show. So if you didn't
That's
listen to
fair.
all the other episodes of the show, we just got back a few days ago from CubeCon, which is the first cube-specific Magic event that was held in Madison, Wisconsin, for 4-day cube extravaganza. So there's about 200 people from all over the world, a couple people from Europe, a couple people from South America, mostly from North America, though. And so many cubes all in one room. It was structured as an organized event, so we did have points you earn over the weekend in the official drafts to go to a top 64 on Sunday, which eventually broke down to a top 8, which eventually was run by Caleb Durward. So there was a competitive nature to it. But there's also just a bunch of people there playing cubes they brought with them in side events. So
Yeah,
That's what it was.
We just played Magic for 4 days straight. And you know what? The night before, we also played Cube, and then we actually played more Cube yesterday. It's been a lot of Cube, and it's been a ton of fun. I feel like we should just say off the top that CubeCon was fantastic. I think that it really exceeded my expectations, which were already high. It was just so great to meet a bunch of people and play a lot of Cube, and big thanks to everybody who put it together.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to the organizers because that's kind of thankless work, Like, they probably lost money on it for all we know.
We're
like,
literally thanking them right now.
Almost
Yes.
certainly. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not thankless. God. Like insufferable pedants over here. Anyway, favorite cube, Anthony, you drafted. Or if there's anything else, do you have any other preamble?
No.
Great. What was
So
your favorite cube then?
It's I love to weasel out of questions, and this is not going to be any exception. I think it's really hard for me to pick a favorite cube because what was really exciting was the variety. There were a whole bunch of different cubes that were sort of featured by the event, and they were representing a huge variety. There were sort of, the classic high-powered vintage legacy type cubes. There was peasant and pauper cubes. There were kind of more novelty cubes, and being able to just access that range, and especially things that we don't have access to in our local play group was a blast. So I appreciate the variety. The two that I'll call out specifically were, I did really enjoy my draft of the Uber Bear Artifact Cube and of the Rainbow Synergy Cube, because I just sort of really tried to commit to the bit and lean into what those environments were about. I didn't win, but I had a lot of fun playing those games.
Did you commit to the bit in the Artifact Cube and then get blown out by some green-white Reclamation Sage deck?
I didn't, no. I just lost a regular way.
The normal way to better
Yeah.
artifacts played sooner in the game.
Pretty much, yeah.
So you're not picking a favorite, you're picking two favorites.
I'm picking two favorites. And
Wow.
But I think that I appreciate what those brought to the table. Those are not by any means the best cubes.
I didn't ask you for the best.
Okay, well, I'm not giving
You're
it to
straw manning this. No one asked you for the best.
That's a hot take.
That there is no best cube?
There is no best cube.
There are always best cubes. The
Okay.
best cube is the one
And
that
what
you-
is the best cube?
The best cube is the one that you make, right?
Yeah, I can't choose
You can't
my own
choose your
cube,
own.
obviously.
You would want to choose your own. You're being diplomatic.
I mean, if I didn't think my cube was the best cube, I would put different cards in it until it was.
Until
right?
it wasn't your cube anymore.
Exactly. Daniel, you got the mic. What was your favorite cube you drafted all weekend?
I really enjoyed the Rainbow Synergy cube. as
Oh,
well.
shocker.
I know,
So much
right?
so you
was-
drafted it
I did it.
more
It was
than
the one
once.
that I chose first, and I got blown out. I just didn't. I just tried to do too many things in the deck at one time, and then I went back.
Another
to it-
shocker.
And then I went back to it at the end. It's the only one that I drafted twice.
Okay.
And the second time I went 2-1, and I just made this incredible tokens deck. I was able to do a March of the Multitudes for 12. So, anytime you can do that in a limited format, I consider that a win.
Now, how does this cube compare to your rainbow cube, which is, of course, a little different? Everyone starts with a Pillar of the Parents in play. We talked about this on the show before. We'll put the links in the show notes. But you are a man that owns a gold rainbow-themed cube. Did you take anything away from this environment about your own cube, or did you learn something you want to bring to your own environment?
I really liked that it was committed to synergies within cards, and it didn't need to be all gold in order to make those synergies happen. You had a really strong black-red sacrifice deck. You had a really strong green-white tokens deck. You had a really good blue-white.
Were you just playing
Blinking
two
deck.
colors in your tokens deck?
I splashed blue,
Okay.
but yeah,
Okay.
for the most part, I just kept to a Selesnya setup. But you the idea that it doesn't have to be all gold in order to be emblematic of what those colors represent. I really, really liked that.
Theo, what was the favorite cube you won all weekend? I mean, drafted.
Well, I might have to pull an Anthony and pick two cubes, which the first one I'll go with is the Devoid Cube, which is probably maybe the most unique cube I drafted. It's just totally different from any
It is
other
weird, yeah.
cube experience because there's no colors. That's what Devoid means. So,
Well, but there is colored mana, though. It's actually
right, there are colored cards that have the Devoid cube,
Right.
but mostly it's just colorless. And I drafted this modular aggro deck with Arcbound Ravager, Walking Ballista, Steel Overseer, that kind of stuff, and I just totally ran people over. And there was a super synergistic deck.
Did you have any cards with colored mana costs in
no,
your
I
deck?
just went full on colorless.
Damn, see, that's what I
Yeah.
tried. I was like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to mess around with these,
Yeah, it's
trying
not
to get fixing lands.
Spending enough picks on basic lands to actually cast a spell was not worth it. So
yeah, some other people that play in it was Dan Schneider's the owner of the Devoid Cube, a designer from New York, and some other players that are in his play group are saying oh, the colored cards are actually the key to this environment. And after I drafted my colorless deck, I did pretty bad. I went 1-2 in that cube, and it felt like it was bad. But you obviously have shown that you don't need basic lands in your deck or non-waste in your deck.
The utility lands are really strong because even if they tap or colorless, when the opportunity cost is just a waste, they get way better. So I had Rashad and Port, Mutavault, Mistress Factory, all that stuff.
Those get nuts. I mean,
which are just insanely good.
I mean, they're already really good in aggro, and that's
Yeah.
with the caveat that they don't tap for your colors in a normal aggro deck. So that's number one.
Yeah, that's number one. The other cube was 4 Packs of Magic, which is Derek's cube, and that's like the total other end of the spectrum. Has loads of fixing. I drafted like this 5-color deck with like Omnath and Soul of Windgrace, and yeah, I played 0 basic lands, just total pile of cards, and
It's 4 by what? How big are the packs?
4 by I think it was 15.
Wow, that's
Maybe
a lot of
16.
cards.
And you pick 2 cards out of the first pick of each pack also.
Okay, interesting.
So, but yeah, the part I like is just it's super low curving. You draft like it's non-singleton on a few cards. You draft like an almost constructed like legacy style deck, and there's tons of interaction. Yeah,
Yeah, that seems like a very Theo cube. Patrick?
Hello.
Hello, Patrick.
Scumboi, what you got?
All right. Well, first off, I want to say also just shout out to Andy for being the dad of the crew and for
We
organizing.
fought about this all weekend. I still maintain Parker's more of dad energy.
Yeah, for
Which
being,
one of you
for
rented
being
the van
one of
and
my
drove us
2
all?
dads.
We should have called the van My Two Dads. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we got a beautiful Ford
Brand new Ford Transit.
Transit with
Look,
1,000
I'll tell the story.
miles on
Look,
it.
so
Yeah.
I was looking. We were considering flying at first, but then it was like there was nowhere we could stay. We were too late getting accommodations to stay anywhere within walking distance of the Alliant Energy Hall, which, to be honest, it's a convention center. It's not much within walking distance of it already, but the closest place we could stay was like miles away. So if we went, we were either going to have to get lifts twice a day or like rent a car out there, which is going to be a hassle. And then like flying with magic cards is annoying because TSA always thinks it's C4 plastic explosive. So I started looking at rental cars and I was like, man, everything's so expensive. Like a minivan was like $1,200 for the week. A SUV was like $1,300 for the week. But guess what a Ford Transit van is? $450 for the whole week. So I locked that in like July. And this van had 1,000 miles on it when we got it. We like tripled the mileage on this thing.
I didn't get a chance to follow up with you. Did you see the person's face when you returned it and they checked the mileage?
I didn't get to see his face. He was actually waiting outside for me, which was kind of strange. Like, I got out. I had my bike in the back. This is how I get rental cars. I put my bike in the back.
Yeah.
I parked. I took the bike out, locked it up to a light post, turned around, and he's right there like, hey, I'll take that. And then just, like, took the car, and I unlocked my bike and rode away. But he did pause for a moment when he got in and, like, looked at it. It was definitely the right guy, yeah. That'd be pretty funny if some guy just stole the rental car from me. I'll take the rental car from you.
Okay.
You probably would have heard about it by now.
At least it was the same guy that gave me the rental car. So if it's a grift, it's a good grift. You know, he's you get me on both sides.
But yeah, I just got to say, really a fantastic week.
Oh, so good.
I felt like a kid. We ran ourselves ragged, drafting 3 or 4 times a day. I think we can give the people a little peek behind the curtain. We played a lot of Super Smash Brothers in the evening.
We did do this. It's true.
Yeah, it was a really good time. Got an Airbnb together and bunked up.
I have not stayed up that late in a long, long time where I'm having one of those weekends where it's like there's just too much fun stuff to do, so sleep is no longer a priority. I am an old man. I'll take some dad points and say that I prioritize my sleep in the rest of my life, but this is one of those weekends where I'm still recovering. Maybe you hear my voice, like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, 100% me as well.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
You look at Anthony.
Big same.
Just stare at Anthony like, what do you got to say?
I'm doing okay today. Yesterday
fell
was
asleep.
a little rough.
Yeah.
Friday morning, my voice was, or what day? Saturday morning,
Sunday.
Sunday morning. Yeah, Friday would have been aggressive. Sunday morning, my voice was just shot. Talking too much.
So, Patrick, Scumboi, favorite cube?
Okay, so I would have to say that my favorite cube that I drafted was the Amonkhet Desert Cube.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here to report on that because Parker's not here in this episode, but I know he loved that cube
Parker
too.
really enjoyed himself as well. But yeah, I think it was, 17, 18 cards, 3 packs?
Yeah, I think it was 18 cards.
18 cards a pack, and you draft your lands. The only lands that you can play with are mixed up with everything else. And every single land that I drafted went into my deck.
That means you did it perfectly, I think.
But it was so much fun.
Perfectly
I built
calibrated.
an extremely fun Esper kind of zombie discard synergy. Verena was in there. I also had a Trade Roots, was getting a bunch of value off of that. And I drafted 2 Hedron Crabs and a Lab Man and was able to win by milling myself out a couple different games.
I mean, that would be your favorite. That sounds incredible.
Extremely satisfying.
Truly incredible. We also got to give a shout out to you, Patrick. You started drafting Cube with us, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and you racked up your first 3-0 ever at CubeCon.
That's true. First 3-0. Shout out to the Devoid Cube. Also, Theo and I had a really good strategy. The night before, you had gone 3-0 in the Old Border Foil Cube by drafting a mono red burn deck. And that same night, I went 3-0 by drafting like a modular aggro deck in the Devoid Cube, and then we chatted about it. And the following day, we each drafted each other's decks and did really well. But yeah, that's how it works. The meta shifts. I also shout out to I did get to play Gavin in the finals.
Play against Gavin Verhey.
Play against Gavin, like in the third matchup, basically.
Right, yeah.
And I got
you were
crushed.
playing for the 3-0.
Playing for the 3-0, got crushed. But he was totally a regular guy. Nice guy. just
Counter to the popular notion that he's what exactly?
Just would like you to know that he is, in fact, a living, breathing human
no,
being.
he's a regular guy. He said, I actually think I forgot to mention this, but he told me that he listens to this podcast on his ride to work.
Hi, Gavin.
Hello,
Hi, Gavin. It's funny. I feel like I got the real sidekick treatment. He was really excited to meet Andy, and he was like, "Oh, this guy, cool."
I'm just taller than
hi,
you.
Gavin.
I'm just
It
bigger
was
and
good to
taller
meet
than
you very briefly.
And like maybe he knew my name because I was on coverage or something.
Yeah,
Maybe
you're
he
the
didn't know
pretty
who
face.
you were.
That's okay. I'm comfortable with that.
You're the brains behind the
You
operation.
really are. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm an idiot. Anyway, cool. Yeah, the Amakar Desert Cube. I gotta say, I really wanted to draft that cube. I didn't get to over the weekend because it just didn't work out that way, unfortunately. I was talking to Parker about it and talking to you about how much you loved it, and it occurred to me that like one detail of that, which is like a small detail, but I think a big deal, is that it's like operationally so much easier. You don't have to separate basics out. You don't have to bring basics. You just like everything is the cube, and you're just like, oh, you're done. Give me your whole deck. Put it back in. Like it's probably already in a pretty randomized order. We'll shuffle a little bit when we go again. It's like those little things that I feel like make it that much easier to draft when you want to just sit down and put a pod together.
Absolutely. Also, can I give one more honorable mention?
You can do whatever you want.
Shout out to our buddy Scott's cube, which I drafted for the first time.
Not in the main event, but, you know, a little side event cube.
Not in the main event, but we drafted it twice over the weekend, and I thought it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Clearly inspired, I think, a fair amount by the Bun Magic Cube, but also had a lot
I don't
of
know if that's true.
their own personal flair. Well, maybe not. Either way, it's a great cube.
Maybe Scott inspired me. You don't know.
Yeah, of course.
My favorite cube of the weekend surprised me, actually. So I wanted to draft. There was an old border foil cube there, which was a cube that all old border cards, all foiled out. So, you know, a very precious object, obviously. And I wanted to draft it kind of purely for nostalgia's sake, right? Like I did play Magic back in like the mid 90s, late 90s. And so I have emotional connections to some of those cards. Frankly, I didn't expect it to be like that interesting of a draft environment. There's a big power delta between those cards. A lot of them are pretty dinky. You're playing with like really underperforming, like understated cards. And it's interesting that like that cube is an even tighter restriction than like pre-modern because a lot of pre-modern cards just aren't printed in foil. So it's actually a really narrow card pool that this designer is pulling from. But I had such a good time drafting that cube. It did obviously tick all the nostalgia boxes, right? Like it touched that little nerve in my brain. It was like nostalgia. That's a good chemical. But it really contextualized how I feel about modern Magic to play some older Magic because like this designer has made no attempt to limit complexity in the cube, for example. But there's like so few tokens and there's like so few counters and there's like cards just do what they say they do and there's like you don't have to reread them a million times to understand it and it like actually truly felt different, right? Like the boards were all immediately grokkable. That was really powerful, I thought. And then it also struck me that, you know, I've talked on the show a lot about I love low curving Magic, I like efficient Magic, and I like, you know, creatures that get your opponent dead quick. I don't like long drag out games. And this environment, you know, it's a lot slower because creatures were a lot worse back then, right? So you're not going to get your opponent dead on turn 3 or 4. But what's that? Did you do that?
Well, I don't know about turn 4, but you can kill people pretty fast.
Pretty close to it. Yeah, Ball Lightning's a hell of a card.
Ball Lightning do work.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was struck by the fact that you can still have efficient Magic in one sense, which is that you can still have a bunch of cheap cards, right? They can still be efficient in terms of mana, but just slower in terms of clock, right? So if the stats on the creatures are just lower, you can still use all your mana every turn and have all the same arrays of decisions that I like so much in like the Bun Magic cube at a different power level where the games felt like I almost felt like the games were kind of like meditative, which sounds weird, but like I felt myself being much more slow and deliberate about my turns and just thinking about all the options because it felt like I could do that. Where I feel like oftentimes things get more abstracted in faster cubes. So I think I'm going to build a cube that is inspired by that cube, or at least inspired by trying to capture that kind of Magic because it felt totally different. Like I didn't think it would be that different, and it was like almost a different game to me.
I only caught one game that you were playing when you drafted that cube, but you were playing our buddy Max, and you definitely seemed very zen.
Look, all I'll say is that deck was really good. I loved that deck. My first 2 matches like went to turns. I won one, and I lost the second one in a real heartbreaker in turns. And then I played Max in the third round, and Max was playing a Rebels deck. So For those that don't
very
know,
on brand.
For those that don't know the Rebels mechanic from Mercadian Masks, if you look at these cards, they look awful. Frankly, you're like, these are undercosted creatures, or rather overcosted creatures. They are like 3 mana for a 2/2 or whatever, and they all have an activated ability where you can pay 1 more mana than its mana value and tap it to go get a Rebel out of your deck of that mana value and put it into play. And the Rebels are all bad, so you're not getting any good cards, which is very important. But this strategy against counterspells is infuriating. Max just like turn 2'd a Rebel, whatever the 2-drop Rebel is, and then just didn't cast any spells for the rest of the game. And I had my beautiful Suffocating Blast and Syncopate and all these cards just rotting in my hand, and it was very tilting to be slowly ground out. And also Max is like, he's got a particular way of winning, which is that he's very excited that he's winning. He like calls the designer over and says, "You're going to want to see this. You're going to want to check this out. Look what I did." And I'm just sitting there mauling.
Shout out to Jeff, by the way. I believe it was Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff.
Nice guy. Got to play against him as well.
Yeah, he was cool. Everyone was cool. Good vibes all around this weekend, I would say. Well, maybe not all around. There's a couple little stories.
I would say pretty much all around. I mean, this really felt like a totally different Magic event in that sense, that it wasn't just a bunch of people totally there to spike it. Everyone seemed pretty much there to enjoy that like variety of different environments and really just to meet a bunch of people. And there was just such an enthusiasm, especially like that first night of just like people wandering around like, hey, we're going to fire off a quick cube draft. We're looking for 2 more. And everybody was so enthusiastic.
I heard a lot of people that like
vibe.
fired their first 8-person drafts of their cubes at this event
Oh, that's
because like
awesome.
their
I love
small,
that.
their local
Yeah.
playgroup isn't big enough, and so they've had the cube for years, but never gotten to draft it with 8. And they
That's
just got to
great.
go do it, which is so exciting. I would say 90% of the people were
90
there, were there for that reason. There were definitely.
I'm going to go 90, 96.
There were some
97.
people, I almost feel like, because this is the first time this event is run, I almost
Yeah.
feel like the people that are conditioned to be like spiky tryhards just brought their normal attitude. They play like at a GP or whatever to this like event, and it felt kind of odd to me with the occasional person that was just like,
Sure.
for example, not conceding to a Teferi Hero of Dominaria emblem and a Jace upticking every turn. You've got
Look, I'm
only
not gonna-
2 permanents in play. You got 2 forests in play, but Anthony can't kill you in 5 turns. So, oops, I guess it's a draw. I'll take that point.
I'm not going to begrudge anyone playing within the rules. It was the first time this event was run, so nobody really knew what to expect. And
Right.
some people were there just for a more competitive, experience. And I think that is going to be one of the interesting challenges going forward is how do you balance this event? Because it does sound like they're going to keep trying to make this an annual event, which I'm really looking forward to.
They did make a very intentional point to say in every marketing material thing that it was a competitive cube event, which I think behind closed doors was J-Bro. Like, we have to make this competitive. CubeCon!
Shelly Deli. ABT, baby. Always beat Thraven.
We love you, J-Bro. Anyway, so they marketed it as a competitive event, and I wonder how much that changed people's perceptions too. But yeah, there was a couple things where it's like, some people got like so salty in the top 64 drafting your cube, Anthony, like mad at
It
each
seems
other
like maybe
over deck building.
all of the contentious moments I was a part of.
No, you weren't a part of this. They were just like they fought over some like whether or not you're allowed to goldfish your deck in the deck building phase, and then got all salty and like just. What I hope is that they are not catering to those players next year and thinking, well, we had our competitive players here. How can we make them have a better time and get more of them? I hope they're catering to the rest of us.
Speaking as the rest of us, I am not a competitive player. I don't care about being like in the top 8 or top 64 or anything like that. And I, in fact, was not in the day 2 setup.
Day 4, I guess.
Day
It's
4,
the
I
4th
guess.
day
Yeah.
of the event.
But I found that like those that weren't in the 64, we were just drafting and having a good time.
Those are probably the more fun people to
We
hang
had
out
a lot of fun. It would seem to be like the worse off you did over the course of the weekend, the more fun you were actually having drafting and playing and having like fun with friends around a table.
Well, we can get that to Theo. Theo, you finished like 9th in the event overall. Did you have fun?
Yeah, I had a great time.
Counterpoint.
Had a good time stopping
I didn't
people.
really have any experiences with people, trying to like shark me out or whatever.
Yeah. They were few and far between. I had one guy that just like, I missed a trigger, which benefited me. And then 2 turns later, I realized, which is obviously too late to get your trigger. But then at the end of the game, he was like, yeah, man, that trigger cost you the game. And I was like, did you see me miss it? He was like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, well, like, sure. I mean, yes, you're within the rules of Magic to not call out my missed trigger. But it's just things I would never do, right? Like, they're within the rules.
Yeah.
You can't begrudge them too much. But like, I would never not concede the game where I literally have no chance of winning, nor would I let my opponent miss a trigger I saw. But what are you gonna do?
I tried to point out, like people like misplayed cards. I feel like a decent amount, just because people are drafting these cubes with
all
like
new
hundreds of
cards.
cards that they've never played before.
Yeah,
so,
I think rules violations are much more likely here than like
I
a
think
limited
it's-
event or
It's
whatever.
totally reasonable to point people out in their missed triggers and whatnot.
Yeah, I'd never played Conclave Mentor before. Maybe I played it in Guilds of Ravnica Limited. I missed the death trigger on Conclave Mentor. Should have gained 4 life.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt that in the Rainbow Synergy Cube where I drafted this sort of like cool Nib to Light deck, and I was just trying to get every single gold card I could to fill out my deck, which meant that I was just playing all kinds of cards I'd never seen before. I was just like, I need more 2-drops, and I need more Azorius cards. Sure, get in here. And I made a lot of mistakes. That was rough, but it was all for the glory of Niv Mizzet.
Yeah, but even in my top 64 draft, everyone was in a great mood. That was like a very friendly table, even though it was, one of the higher stakes drafts because it was to get into top 8. Nobody was being weird and salty. So, yeah, it was definitely the exception, not the rule. I just really wanted an excuse to tell the story of that person that didn't concede to you because I think it's legendary. I think it's legendary. That guy's like, nope, sorry.
Shout out to that guy.
Apparently, he also called a judge over to ask, like, do I get points for a draw? And then when told yes, I'll take that then.
Yep, yeah. I mean, so what I would say is that was a little bit of a heartbreaking moment because it was the very first match, and I was feeling like I was playing pretty well. Like, I'm not a great player. I feel like I was
Friday
playing
morning.
And drafting better than I usually do, and was like assembling this combination of planeswalkers and
not your normal kind of magic to play a bunch of
not
planeswalkers.
Normal kind of magic. And really, I mean, I think the issue was the round times were really, really tight. So literally, if we had had one more turn, it would have been A-okay. But I wasn't fast enough. That's
they
fine.
Did listen to that feedback and make the rounds later,
yeah.
or make the rounds longer later in the weekend, which I think was. I don't know. Again, shout out to the organizing staff. Like, they did a really good job organizing a brand new kind of event. There were no major hiccups, and they even listened to feedback, like people being like, "Whoa, 40 minutes! Whoa, I'm confused."
Yeah, I also, to bounce on that, I really liked that they listened to the feedback about having the lands at the tables as opposed to at the judges' table. At the beginning, they kept
the
all
very
of the
first
cue
draft,
boxes up at the beginning, up at the table with the judges.
Which is safer, probably,
Yeah, but you have to go up and say, I would like 5 plains and swamp, please. And then they have to ask, which cube are you in?
Yep.
And then you had to wait for them to grab it and then put it back. And it was just this whole thing. And then on days 2, 3, and 4, they were like, okay, we're just going to
even on the second draft of that day. That was literally one draft. And the afternoon draft, they were like, we're done with this. I think they themselves were like, this is really frustrating. I don't want to have to give out all these lands. Yeah. This sucks.
I haven't counted all my fancy basics for my Turbo Cube yet, but hopefully they're all still in there.
I'm sure
either way, it was worth it.
I'm sure they're there.
I want to take it back a step real quick and say, Anthony, you are a great Magic player.
Oh, thanks. It's not.
I did find this event to be a little bit humbling. I mean, like, we play with a decent sized group here, but I think the overall skill level of this event was pretty high. I think the average player was pretty darn good, and not an event you could just like expect to find a bunch of scrubs at. Because I mean, you can be a pretty invested Magic player to show up to the Cube event. Though I did meet a bunch of people that was like, "This is my first ever Magic event," or "This is like the second time I've ever drafted a Cube, and it's here," which was really cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, it was hugely variable in terms of skill level and experience for sure.
Can I give some feedback?
You can just talk. You don't have to ask me for permission to say things.
Thank you. All right. So what I will say is that I would love to see more tracksuits next year.
I'm not gonna lie. I have never considered myself a tracksuit person, and just being around you for 4 days, seeing you had a different tracksuit for every day, I was like, damn, Patrick looks good, and I got myself thinking about a tracksuit now.
I feel like I'm getting eyed over here. my fashion needs a tune-up, and tracksuits is the answer.
It seems comfortable.
That makes me really happy to hear. Yeah, it's great. It's like you're wearing pajamas, but you also look fly as hell.
The perfect combination.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, sometimes you're not sure if something's you, and then, like, once you find a tracksuit that fits and you put it on, and you're just like, oh, wait.
This is me.
I have arrived. Yeah.
Scumbboy's on the scene.
Here we are. That's my dream. My dream for next year is that the whole crew rolls up representing Baltimore in tracksuits.
I hope we have more people next year even. We brought 8 people this year, but there was a lot of local players that were like, just couldn't make it because of a weird scheduling conflict, or were like, I'll come next year, but after you tell me it's fun. Like, I don't want to roll the dice on a literally brand new event. So I think we can get even more next year and really represent.
We definitely have at least a few folks from the local play group who already reported that they were regretting not showing up.
Yeah.
So
I think it's going to be cool.
I think that's a good sign.
Next up, I want to know if people had any like weird experiences with cards. I feel like one of the things I was most excited about is getting to play with cards I never get to play with otherwise. Did anybody have any cool cards that like changed their mind by playing them, or weird interactions that they were excited about?
Yeah, I'll start with this one. I drafted the Devoid Cube, and I found it really, really challenging. I didn't know where I was going or what lane I was in, and I made that decision too late in the draft.
Did you intentionally draft the Devoid Cube to like do the opposite of what Daniel would do, to do a little Dark Daniel?
Yeah, I tried to do see where my alter ego would lead me, and it led me to a 0-3.
Nega Daniel.
Damn, Dark Daniel sucks at Magic.
Yeah, he's terrible. But I really did not put a lot of power into the Ozolith. I just drafted it because it was a 1-drop. And I thought maybe I have like +1/+1 synergies and things like that. But the later part of one of the rounds, I had that out with an Etched Monstrosity. And then I realized that if I could just use the Crystal Shard, thank you. The Crystal Shard to bounce it back to my hand, it would move the -1 counters onto the Ozolith, and then I could just move those all over to an opponent's creature.
I'm going to trust you on that. I don't know all those cards, but I'm going to trust you on that interaction.
I was like,
I found out for the first time this weekend that you can take -1/-1 counters off the Ozolith and put them on your opponent's creatures, which is not a thing I would have thought to do with it because it doesn't seem...
Seems
right.
counterintuitive, right?
It just seems broken. It seems good.
Yeah.
And presumably it can take -1/-1 counters and +1/+1 counters, unlike a creature, which they neutralize.
Presumably.
I believe
What a
that
great question. None of us are judges here.
neutralize on there as well. The presence of the counters will counteract the counters.
What?
But only on creatures.
It actually happened. Well, at least according to what
On
I heard
all
from
permanents? Okay.
unverified sources, they do actually cancel out on the Ozolith, which is kind of weird.
Oh,
non-intuitive,
okay.
But apparently that's how the rules.
I guess it's
That's
just how
wild.
counters
They
just
just
work.
automatically
I mean, it
cancel
kind of makes
out.
sense, right? Because if it was just on creatures, like what happens if you have a
Why
creature
would they?
land and
Because
you like
can't
put counters on
1/1
it?
counters on any permanent. They just don't function.
Sometimes you can put them on
Yeah.
a land you can turn into a creature.
It's true. I will say, just on the topic
Or
of judges,
Gideon.
it was great having judges to play Cube. I feel like that's always a little bit of a speed bump when it's like, oh, there's some like weird rules interaction, and you pull out Scryfall on your phone and you work it out. It was such a delight just to be like, Judge, how's this work? And they just explained it to you. Like, that's, as a casual Magic player, that's not a privilege that we get very often, and the judging staff was just awesome.
They were so good. And I like took advantage of it. I tried to play really carefully over the weekend because we play very casually in our play group. Like, mess something up, usually allow people to roll it back or whatever within reason. I know it doesn't happen at more, formal events. And so I like to try and practice that every once in a while. So the next time I am at a GP or whatever, it's not the only time I ever play at that sort of level. And so I took advantage of like judges being like, I'm 85% sure I know how this works, or
Right,
95% sure, or 99% sure. Like I even had a judge confirm like, I can discard this thing into madness at instant speed, right? Even though it's a creature, like let's just make sure. Let's just cover all of our bases. And it did feel really good to have that sort of confirmation. I had some fun judge interactions though. So my favorite card I got to play with by far is in the Devoid Cube again. So Dan getting a big airtime here. I got to play with Chaos Orb, which is a card I've always wanted to play with. For those that don't know this card, it is from Alpha. It was printed in Beta and Unlimited, but then taken out of Revised. It was one of the cards that was revised out. And the reason it was revised out is because it's the only Magic card in Alpha that requires some kind of dexterity. It's a 2-mana artifact, and you can pay 1 and sack it to flip it onto the table from a height of at least 1 foot, having it flip at least once in the air, and then when it lands, it destroys every permanent it's touching.
This is some real acorn stamp card shit
Right.
these days.
So there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't work. I mean, it's just banned everywhere in competitive Magic, I think, because they don't want people doing that and they don't want dexterity to be a thing. But
in Dan's Cube, they just play this as a Vindicate, right? They just sort of
no,
eliminate.
so that's the thing. So this is played in pre-modern and other like old formats, and in those formats, they play it like a Vindicate, basically, where you have to choose a target and then you drop it on the target and whatever, it destroys it. But the judging staff made the choice. I don't know how consciously or not, but like I asked the judge during the draft. I said, "Does this card do what it says on it?" And they like went and talked to the head judge, and they like came back and they were like, yes, it does what it says on it. So they played it true to text. So I had an amazing moment where I was playing Gwen Decker in the third round of the Devoid Cube, and game 1, Gwen's got his board all nice and tight and organized. All of his lands right next to his creatures and his equipment. And on turn 4, I just blew up 2 of his lands and 2 of his permanents and 1 of his lands with Chaos Orb. And then for the rest of the match, Gwen called a judge over immediately and said, how far apart am I allowed to put my lands? Like, how far away can my lands still be? And the judge, like, seriously considered the question. It was like, well, you can't go onto your opponent's playmat, but you can go on to any table before your opponent's playmat, and you can't cross the center line, so you have that space to work within. And they were very, like, they really thought about it. It wasn't just like a throwaway thing. And then that's what Gwen did, spread everything out for the rest of the whole match.
That's amazing. So I think that is what happened, is that in the Devoid Cube, typically they just play it as a Vindicate, but because the rule of this event was things are played like according to Oracle text, they just weren't allowed to do it that way.
Right, because if you don't have a very clear way to do it, then like the judging staff will give you different answers, right? So they have to have like an objective way to do it, and they can't go around making special rules for cards. Like, so you just got to play how it's written.
So I was in a pod with Dan, and I believe that was his choice.
Oh, interesting. They gave him the choice?
Yeah, I believe he mentioned that, yeah.
Well, I thought it was awesome, and I loved getting a chance to play with one. That was definitely a tick off the old Magic bucket list for me. And probably, I mean, it's going to be a long time before I touch another Chaos Orb, I suspect. It's not a cheap card because of the collector value.
I had a small funny one in that we had actually talked about on the show that in my cube I have a 2/3 Corpse Knight, which is this misprint from the pre-release packs.
Did you play with the regular Corpse Knight and think it was a 2/3?
No. It was just funny that I threw a 2/2 because I grabbed an extra one from my collection and put it in the box just in case, and like asked the judging staff before they're registering my cube, and I was like, hey, is this cool that there's a 2/3? And Austin, listener to the show, was like, hey, we'll talk to the head judge. We'll figure
Austin
this
was
out.
so cool.
He was
Shout out
great.
to Austin.
And then the head judge came over and he was like, oh, that's great. No.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
Under no
not. So,
circumstances.
that was pretty funny.
I thought you were going to say you played in someone else's cube with a Corpse Knight and assumed it was a 2/3 and he like misplayed badly
No,
with it.
that
would
would have been embarrassing.
I had another fun interaction. I learned through this because you play with these cards and you don't know how they actually interact with each other. I discovered that if you have a card that has rebound while it's in exile before it's actually cast, you can activate other abilities before it so that it has targets.
Yeah, it goes on the stack. You get priority, baby.
Right. Yeah.
But there's
so
a trigger before it even goes in the stack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. So I was able to cast the Seeker's Chariot, ephemerate a Seeker's Chariot, and then re-ephemerate it by
because you're able to crew
making it a
in response to
again.
the
Nice.
Which I would have
rebound
never
trigger.
thought worked, except for like I had to have a judge come over and be like, "Does this work the way that I want it to?" And he's like, "It works the way you want it to."
Those are the best questions.
I feel very
Judge,
smart.
Does,
I really
does this
loved
work?
Yeah, well, also in the Devoid Cube, I guess this cube has a lot of weird rules. I had this card called Weaponized Scrap, which is like a playtest card that I'd never seen before. And I must have called the judge like 5 times to ask questions about it, because it says it has this mechanic called Upgrade, which is kind of like Mutate, and you place it covering another artifact. It's like a 4-mana 6/6, and you upgrade an artifact. And basically the artifact on the bottom turns into the one on top.
and just like ceases to have its original properties.
But it's also not on the battlefield anymore, which was weird to me. So I had like a Nettle Cyst, and I asked the judge, does it count whether or not the one on the bomb's on the battlefield? Apparently it's not. But like if the one on top gets destroyed, they both get destroyed. But yeah, I was just impressed that the judges knew how this playtest card works. That I don't think even has real rules other than what it says on the card.
Yeah, I wonder about the playtest cards because they were played in Mystery Booster drafts at organized events that were like judged. So maybe they actually do have like robust Oracle text, or maybe they just give judges kind of like a little bit of leeway to.
They're rulings on Scryfall, so presumably somebody's made choices about these cards.
The other thing I'll say is I was very sad. I ended up playing the Old Border Foil Cube twice. I chose to play it once, and then it was assigned to me as my top 64 draft. And in that second draft, I drafted a card combination which I've always wanted to play, which is Fires of Yavimaya with Saproling Burst. This is a weird old deck from like extended back in 1998 or whatever, where Saproling Burst is this very strange enchantment that comes into play with 7 fading counters on it, and you can take a fading counter off to make a Saproling token that has power and toughness equal to the number of fading counters on Saproling Burst. So you can put it in play, take a counter off, and make 1 6/6, or you can make 2 5/5s or 3 4/4s, etc. And then fading means a counter comes off every turn, so they shrink every turn. One of the major balancing features of this card is that the creatures don't have haste because so you have to like make your creatures and they all get 1 smaller the next turn before you can attack with them. But with Fires of Yavimaya, it becomes a really disgusting aggro threat. You can just kind of bash your opponent in because it gives all your creatures haste. I drafted these 2 cards in a beautiful like Gruul aggro deck. Never drew them both. I even told everybody before the draft, I'm like, I don't care if I win, I just want to do this thing, and I didn't get to do the thing. Very sad.
Did you at least win?
I went 2-1.
Okay.
It was fine. Close games though. All I had to do was top deck 1 more burn spell. I was getting my shit kicked in by a Scion of Darkness, right? Is that what it is? The
guy with
7
the
mana
horns?
that holds his arms up. He's got cycling
everybody
3.
around the table doing the pose.
He's got I think I actually have one right here. He's got cycling 3, and he steals stuff from your graveyard when you. Yeah, there he is. Sign of Darkness. Yeah, 8 mana, 6/6 trample. Takes creatures from your opponent's graveyard when he hits you.
Neat.
Yeah, that was kicking my teeth in. I needed to draw 1 burn spell to burn him out, but couldn't do it.
I got to play with another card I've never played with before, which was Coercive Portal, which was cool and that was very powerful, but this also really stood out to me on the subject of, the range of experience and skill level and the complexity of cards. This was pretty rough to play with against some opponents that had never seen it before, and just like, let me just shortcut this for you, but also like trust me, or let's call a judge or whatever. Like, this was a little bit of... I had mixed feelings about it, and I feel like, Daniel, you had some issues with this card as well?
You missed an opportunity to shark. You could have been like, I vote for this opponent, and then make them read it and try and figure it out, and don't help them. Maybe
Just
they vote
don't
for something
help
else.
them, yeah.
That's what some of these sharks would have done.
Yeah, I was having a rough time. I drafted it thinking that it could be a board wipe. Because I play
Unfortunately,
Commander,
no.
and in a Commander, it's a pretty powerful board wipe whenever you want it to be. Well, you can, yeah.
I guess if one player is way ahead,
yeah,
that it is.
Yeah, it's a game of politics. So if you have 2 or 3
You
players
love your political cards.
that want to do
Would
carnage,
you consider running for office?
Yeah, no.
Too much self-respect?
Too little imagination.
Okay, that's not what I expected the answer to be. I think if he was much more imaginative than your average politician, but go off, King.
So I played the coercive portal thinking that, okay, I'm going to be able to like destroy all of this nonsense.
You just kept voting for Carnage and tears running down your face.
Exactly.
Carnage, please, Carnage.
So I didn't realize that it was basically like a one-sided Phyrexian arena, essentially, in the Devoid Cube. And I was like feeling really bad about it. And I got to the second game and I played it knowing now that it's just like to draw me cards. And my opponent asked, "What is this?" And I started to read it to my opponent. And the judge came out over and says like, basically it just tells you to draw a card a turn. And I was
know it's bad when a judge is shortcutting a card like
Yes.
that, because their whole job is to not do that. So
yeah, it was a feel bad because I was like, well, maybe I'll convince them that maybe we do want to destroy the whole battlefield at some point.
Maybe us as a team, we do want to destroy everything, just as a little
over.
fun activity.
it's not impossible to arrive at a board state where both players agree that the best thing to do is wipe the board.
This sucks.
I mean,
One
they
player's
both
wrong.
could think
One
they have the
player's
edge
wrong.
of what's in
Yeah.
their hand. I mean, someone's definitely wrong, but people are wrong in Magic all the time. I was really struck by just the complexity of playing with so many new cards.
Yeah.
Again, 3 whole drafts a day. It's brain melting, and then you get to the last draft and there's all these cards you don't know. It's like I really felt the complexity we talk about so much on the show, and I think we talk about it partially in a practical sense, but honestly more in theoretical sense. Practically, we're drafting our cubes with the same people most of the time. Complexity doesn't really come up for the most part. Maybe a new player will show up and we'll have to explain that actually burn spells can target planeswalkers too. I know it's kind of confusing. That sucks. But I had a player sitting next to me in my draft of the Devoid Cube who was relatively new to Magic and had all kinds of questions about printings of cards, right? They had a copy of a beta Icy Manipulator and we're like, so I can just do this however many times I want, because in beta, Icy Manipulator doesn't have a tap symbol. It's just a mono artifact, which meant that it inherently taps in the rules at that time. And, I just felt like there was a lot of times where I was frazzled by the sort of complexity of cards, which was part of why I was so struck by how much fun I had drafting the little border cube, because it felt like a breath of fresh air compared to all the double-sided cards and sagas and planeswalkers and just really complicated stuff going on.
Yeah, I'll say that with the Dichotomy Cube, I played the Dichotomy Cube, I think, end of day 2. And it was a breath of fresh air because it was I could look at it and I could deduce what I wanted to do. And I ended up doing Changeling, Tribal, and then a whole bunch of creatures that cared about one type of creature. And I felt really good in that moment because I didn't have to put too much brain power in figuring out what I needed to do to win.
Yeah, I sat down to draft that the very last draft of Saturday, so the last draft before the top 64 thing, and I was exhausted. And I told myself whatever, I'm just gonna check out and take cards and not really care about it. And I ended up 3-0ing that draft, which I was not thinking about as much as I was thinking about all the other drafts that were melting my brain, and I was going 1-2 or 2-1. But there I was just I'm only taking white cards. I don't want to think about mana fixing because there's none in the environment. I'm just going to take the best white card in every pack, and it worked out. So
I feel like another sort of outcome of that complexity, and especially the complexity in the context of drafting a whole bunch of new cubes, is I'm looking through a bunch of my decks and I kind of know a lot of these cards, which is not the case when I looked at the packs. I definitely think I fell
for sure,
victim to
definitely a bias to cards.
just being biased and taking cards I knew and understood how to play with, and passing up probably on a lot of the more interesting novel things. And yeah, I definitely think I probably lost out on some experiences from that.
And some win percentage,
and definitely a lot of win percentage, which I had a lot of opportunities to do more of.
One thing that I noticed too is that I am known for having a predilection for cheap spells, cheap cards. I love my decks to have no 4 or more mana spells and limited 3 mana spells if I can pull it off, even if it's a control deck sometimes. And most of the cubes I played did not have a curve that would accommodate that. You couldn't draft a deck like that in most of the cubes I ended up playing. I was forced to draft 5 drops, even a couple 6 drops. Ugh. Had to do it, though, because that was what was in the packs. And it's going to sound very stupid, but I was impressed at how good the more expensive cards are in terms of mana. They do more, it turns out.
Wow,
So
what a hot take.
I definitely had a lot of games at one where it was like, oh, I get to play my 5 drop now on turn 5, and that's better than all your cards, so deal with that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of conflating designer and player perspective on that one, because when someone actually ends up casting their 6-drop on curve, it's obviously good. You know? But the problems with it comes when you don't see your opponent cast it and it's stuck in their hand. So there's a little bit of selection bias there.
Yeah, even just 4 and 5 drops though, it was I don't know. Yeah. I was struck by myself. I was like, man, this is not the kind of curve I want to draft in this deck. And then it felt like in the games, I needed those cards that were much more valuable to win. Otherwise, I would just be spinning my wheels a little bit.
Did you get a chance to draft the 2 CMC or less cube?
I didn't. It was another one on my list, but I didn't get to do it. I'm also a little tilted they don't call it the 2 mana value or less cube. We don't use
It's
CMC
not called
anymore.
or less is the real problem.
Oh, right. It's just called it 2.
CMC.
Yeah,
and I thought
exactly.
it would be only
It's a
2
difficult.
drops.
It's a difficult
But,
cube to name that concept in a
yeah.
clear way. I really enjoyed that.
I would call it deuces or lower.
That was the cube where actually like the deck that I drafted just looked most like a deck that I would like to play regardless of the environment. If I just added, I just drafted like Naya, mostly white, a little bit of green, a little bit of red, aggro stuff. And if I just added like a couple 3-drops and a 4-drop, it would be like, this is a normal cube deck from some kind of environment. But also the manlands were really, really good, which I love that.
That's interesting because I was in the same draft and I felt like I totally changed my evaluation of cards. Like I valued mana sinks really highly.
I definitely did that, yeah.
I drafted a mono black kind of really grindy deck, and I don't know. I just thought it was super interesting how the evaluation of cards just totally changes. And what ended up happening in the end is I felt like repeatable value engines kind of dominated the game. Me and Anthony had a match where it was he had Sprout Swarm and I had Retrofitter Foundry, and we just flooded the board with tokens.
That was a rough.
On
You're
both
just like, I'm going to
sides.
slowly upgrade these to 4/4s. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I'm going to make 3 Saplings a turn and block them. And are we happy about this?
Well, yeah, Anthony eventually conceded, which I think was reasonable, and we both just wanted the game to be over. And
I think that eventually you would have won. Yeah.
But we would have gone to time before that would happen. So
Yeah, that was actually a really interesting thing about that environment. I think there was some criticism that some of the X-Spells and mana sinks kind of broke the spirit of the environment in a little bit of a way. But I actually don't totally agree with that because
Yeah, I feel like the spirit is kind of like just having another arbitrary restriction, the way that
spirit is,
so
yeah.
many cubes are just arbitrary restrictions.
twist it and figure out how that particular restriction plays out and what are the weird edge cases and the fact that Meat Massacre is a weird edge case where it fits this restriction but doesn't play like you would expect is actually kind of an interesting outcome. If this was a cube
Meat
that I was
Master is
playing,
X black.
right? Yeah,
I didn't know that.
If this was
mana or
an
less.
environment that I was playing every single week and the goal was just let's create the best play experience bar none, sure I might suggest taking those out, but in the context of CubeCon of trying to push in different directions and experience magic in novel ways, I thought that was actually relevant and interesting.
That was something I was also really struck by is I don't think, and I could be wrong, I didn't get the sense that any of the designers of these cubes made CubeCon specific alterations. We're thinking okay, this is going to be drafted by new people that have never played it before. I'm going to make these changes because of that. But there were definitely moments you had a player, Anthony, that drafted Drakehaven in the Turbo Cube, which it's one of the cards that maybe looks like it's going to be really good because you think, oh, I can make a Drake for no mana. But actually you can't because it's not an activated ability. And that's an example of a card. I think in hindsight, you would probably have just cut that. Because
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like this is a whole other episode we could do about not playing these cubes, but designing cubes approaching the environment, approaching this kind of event. And I would absolutely have cut that if I had that experience. And if we draft this again, I will.
Yeah, I did not have a good time with the Drake Haven.
Was it you?
Oh, you also.
I got
there were
really
multiple
I
people.
didn't,
And
this was before the sanctioned game started. We drafted it the night before, and I was like, oh, it doesn't work like I wanted it to, because I thought I was going to get 0-3 crabs at the same time I was getting 2/2 flyers, and I thought this is going to be a great thing.
they would be
And
very great.
It was a real feel bad when I realized, oh no, this is not going to get me any win whatsoever, and that was my win con.
you took it a little bit better than the other person who was trapped, though,
I
who
was- I like
told
you.
that that's
So,
not how the card worked and left their playmat and their car keys and their dice bag and just walked
They just
Walked
walked
into
away.
the ocean.
They just dropped, immediate drop. Sadie doesn't like that either.
I think they figured it out, but I felt pretty bad about that. And I think, the upshot was just when we draft cubes in our local playgroup, there'll often be a little pre-cube speech and we'll cover hey, don't get trapped by this, maybe focus on this in the environment.
At least if there's someone new there, we'll do
Yeah,
that, right?
ask,
oh, you haven't
are
played
there
this
any
before.
questions?
The one thing I'll say about my cube always, about Magic Cube, is there's a reanimator in there. There's not a reanimator deck. Do not look for Grizzlebrand because you could pack one, pick one, reanimate, and be like, I'm going to be the reanimator deck, and that's just meant to bring back your Tarmogoyf or whatever.
Totally.
And
so I think that in retrospect, or not in retrospect, in prospect, in the future, I'm
Inspect.
I'm going to take all those cards that I would have made a caveat about, and I'm just not going to put them in I'm going to change and make a custom version of the cube for an event if we're doing that again. I mean, and same goes for the 2/3 Corpse Knight. I think obviously it made sense because of the way it was being judged, but I think it was in hindsight, also absolutely the right choice, just because it wasn't worth confusing somebody with this like weird misprint, even though it's relevant to me as my cube, as this little piece of nostalgia, as part of my
those kind of things are fun. Like those
Yeah.
kind of things do make the cube like more yours, and it's like a cool thing to do. But
at this is not the
specifically in this
for
context,
it.
which
Yeah.
is it's a rare context, right? Like how many people get to just like plop their cube down at a table and say, "Go ahead, let like 48 strangers draft this cube all weekend for the first time," you know?
I agree. I just want to give a shout out to the most backbreaking couple of rounds that I had in the Dakaru cube. That's Gwen's cube, right?
Yes.
Who is one of the main organizers of the event, right?
Yep, and the designer and developer of Cube Cobra.
Shout out to Gwen. Thanks for all your hard work. Fun cube. I had some crazy matchups. My first opponent was running Isochron Scepter Counterspell.
Your first interaction with this particular combo, I understand.
My first
That's a
interaction
really fun
with this
one.
particular
I can
combo.
tell by the expression on your face that you really appreciate
You were like, "Oh,
that.
cool new card, great. What are you going to put under
wow,
it?"
that's
Oh,
such a.
Counterspell?
I'm so impressed you did that. Great.
Here's what I will
job,
say,
opponent.
and I do. I really try and honestly pride myself in just keeping it even keel.
You're very good at staying zen.
Yeah, well, that wasn't always the case, but I had a great day. My first and second cubes that I drafted, I made it to the third round and ended up losing. But either way, I've not been drafting for very long and didn't even expect to make it to the top 64. So I was feeling really good. Had a couple of 2-1s earlier in the day.
You did great.
So by the end of the second sanction day, I was really just like, my brain was a little bit fried.
You were already locked for top 64 too. You already knew you were getting in.
I was already locked in. I was ready to go. Just play Smash with my boys. Theo was sucking everybody off.
What?
As Kirby
playing
in Super
Kirby.
Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
Of course. Yep.
Theo's a Kirby main, sucking everybody up is what I meant to say. And anyway, so Isochron Scepter Counterspell right out of the gate, both games. And then my second matchup, shouts to this guy too, who's from Boston. I forget his name, but he was running. He literally said during the draft, "Today I'm going to choose violence." And I was like, well, I hope I don't play that guy. We'll figure out what that means. And he was running a Smokestack, Crucible of Worlds, Wasteland deck.
And made it work.
And just...
Because oftentimes that deck, like, it sounds so brutal on paper and then it, like, never comes together, but it's impressive that this person made it work.
No, he shut me the fuck down both games, and I had nowhere to go. And
did you consider just, like, dragging the turns out and then when you go to turns, not conceding until that person actually kills you, you know?
I literally couldn't have even done it. Yeah, I didn't have enough permanents in play to make it happen.
He was attacking you with a 2/2.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Braids beat down. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's just end on what everyone's favorite moment from the event was overall. Great weekend overall. Let's talk specifically the CubeCon event. We had a lot of great moments of Smash, obviously, but...
we're out of time. We can't do like a mini pack one, pick one.
We could do it. You want to do a pack one, pick one of a cube?
I was kind of hoping we would get a chance to do it.
Look, if you want to do it, you just tell me what cube. I'll pull it up right now.
Let's see.
One of the CubeCon cubes, because we happen to be looking at the page.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't get to draft the Amonkar Desert Cube, which I do want to play someday, but...
Yeah, well, you're going to pick a land.
Spoil it for you.
Yeah. I didn't get to draft the Bug Cube. I didn't get to draft the Proliferate Cube. I'm so grateful I didn't get to draft the Unreasonable Cube.
That's not for me either, but, it's for somebody.
Yeah, for sure. No, they were having fun over there. I saw them.
Did any of us draft Elasis?
I did, yeah. That was actually
Elasis was great.
Okay. Wow.
Elasis was one of the 2 ones I went on Saturday.
Oh, 4. I'm the one that didn't draft Elasis.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry,
missed
John.
out.
Shout out to John.
How about the UMA-inspired cube?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, from our new friend, Zach.
Yeah.
This cube is a Zach Barash's cube. I hope I'm getting his last name right in terms of pronunciation. And it's inspired by Ultimate Masters. And I heard a lot of great things about this cube all weekend. Didn't get a chance to play it. We're going to pull up a pack one, pick one right now. Anthony, do you want to try reading the cards? You're closer to the screen. We never do this. Let's mix it up.
Yeah, it helps when you zoom in and out slowly.
Patrick's got your back.
I'm trying my best.
All right, in this pack...
And go.
Can you also can you also move the mouse so it's not covering the cards?
He was gonna trace along them, which I also would find distracting.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that. We have Beacon Bolt, Karn Living Legacy, Mirrorsmith, Phoenix of Ash, Reckless Worm, Brea's Apprentice, Containment Construct, Goldmire Bridge, Cleansing Wildfire, Zaitora's Proving Ground, Radical Idea, Frogmite, Invoke Justice, Rise from the Tides, and a Breeding Pool.
Great job.
What's everybody
Good
taking?
job, Anthony.
And of course, if you want to check out this pack, check out the cards mentioned page linked in the card podcast notes.
Yeah, I think I actually clicked start draft instead of sample pack, so I'm just going to take a screenshot of this for you. My bad, homie. Patrick, you wanted to do the pack on pick one. Throwing it to you first. What are you taking here?
Brother, I got to tell you, I'm looking at a lot of cards that I'm not familiar with.
Maybe not the choice then. Well, you start reading.
Well, so
I know what I'm taking out of
one
this
that
pack.
jumps out to me is Cleansing Wildfire. It's cheap. It draws you a card, and it's got some land destruction in there.
That is what it does.
So I really like Cleansing Wildfire because it destroys target land, and controller may search for a library for basic...
All right, so we got permission before the recording started to curse.
We have not been.
And let me just
using
go
our
ahead and
quota.
take this
Now I
opportunity.
really
Not
have that
fulfilled.
Let me
energy.
just go
I
ahead and
said,
take this
kids,
out.
you're allowed to swear on this one. Cussing aloud.
Take this opportunity to tell you all to go fuck yourself.
Look, I know what I'm taking out of this pack.
Not the listeners, us,
No.
us in the room.
No. Thank you all
That's
for
right. You heard it here.
listening.
Scumboi says, if you're listening to this podcast, go fuck yourself. Get sucked off by a curve. Look,
Got
I'm
nothing
taking
better
Rise
to
from the
do.
Tides out of this pack. I don't think it's the most powerful card. I think the most powerful card is probably either Phoenix of Ash or Breya's Apprentice. I think it's a little bit of a toss-up there. But I'm taking Rise from the Tides because I love the card, and it gives me a strategy. And it's a strategy I want to play already. I love playing a bunch of cheap spells, and that's what Rise from the Tides pays you off for.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised you're going to take a 6-drop pick one out of this pack.
It's not my normal brand, but
It's
if I'm going to take a 6-drop, it's one that plays well with a bunch of 1-drops, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree about Phoenix of Ash. Looking at like at least the non-land cards, Phoenix of Ash seems like the strongest one to me, especially in the graveyard cube. I imagine you'll be able to discard the Phoenix or like mill it into your graveyard and basically just get a free card's worth of value, and it just keeps going back. Other than that,
Just taking the Triumph, Theo? Is that what you're going to do?
there's a Triumph, there's a Breeding Pool. Also, Containment Construct is pretty interesting. I know Artifacts and Madness are like very heavily supported. I mean, just looking at this pack, you can tell that.
Very
So,
high ceiling on that card for sure.
Yeah, very high ceiling. I think I'd just go with Phoenix of Ash. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most powerful card in the pack. I can see argument where it's right to start on a Triumph because of how flexible it is, but that's one of the reasons I dislike the Triumph so much. I just don't want to start on a Triumph here personally.
Yeah, I think my first pick is actually going to be Breya's Apprentice. I really like the idea that for super cheap you can get something that will get you a flyer super fast that you can make it bigger. You can also start to move towards an artifact theme. I think that if you do a red-white artifacts here, or maybe even a black-white red artifact thing, that would be my first choice.
Easier to cast too.
Yeah, super easy to cast. Also, when you run out of cards in your hand, you can bonk stuff to get exiled stuff.
You can bonk stuff to get exiled stuff. This has been Daniel's oral history interpretation of the rules text of Breya's Apprentice. Anthony, what are you taking?
So I feel really validated because I'm also really drawn to Rise from the Tides because it's such a cool card. It really fits the theme of this environment.
I just like playing with it, man.
Ultimate Masters was a great set. It was very graveyard focused, and Rise from the Tides was one of the coolest payoffs for it. And it does just reward you for doing a lot of what you want to do, playing lots of removal and interaction.
And cantrips. So many cantrips.
But I also agree, probably Phoenix of Ash are the Proving Ground, the Triome are the right picks, and I'm pretty clearly on Phoenix of Ash. Because, it also does all those things in terms of graveyard interaction, and it just has a pretty high floor.
Yeah, but it's too good to be cool. It's like the jock in high school.
Yeah,
You
fair.
can't be cool if you're the jock.
You sticking with Cleansing Wildfire, Patrick?
Well, listen, I'd take a Triumph if it was a Jeskai Triumph.
You are a Jeskai mage, it's true.
I'm sticking with
Stick to
Cleansing
your
Wildfire.
brand.
What's the combo of Cleansing Wildfire that was played very briefly in Modern? You
There are a
probably
couple
know this,
different
Theo.
ones. You can
Well,
do it with
yeah.
the indestructible lands.
Right in this pack, we see there's a Goldmire Bridge. So if you target
true.
your own indestructible land, it's basically turns into like a rampant growth plus draw card, which is pretty good.
That's some turbo cube shit.
And yeah, that seems okay, I guess. I don't imagine destroying your opponent's lands is really going to do that much because they just get to fix their mana right afterwards. But I'm sure there's a good reason why it's in the cube. I don't know.
Yeah, Zach is a very savvy designer and player, so it's definitely. I mean, I think it might just be honestly for those artifact
Yeah, it
lands.
might
I
just be
assume.
or it might just be like lands in your graveyard matters.
Yeah,
or
that's
something
true.
like
That's
that.
true too. It is a
Yeah.
pretty reasonable way to put a land in your graveyard without not at too much cost to you. Trigger your landfall.
Yeah.
There you go, Patrick. Pack one, pick one. How do you feel?
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy you're here, Patrick.
I'm
It's
I'm
truly a
humbled
delight.
by you all, but I really appreciate it.
Are you humbled by us?
Okay, we're just gonna have to edit this out.
All right. Well, let's just end on our favorite moment from CubeCon.
I think mine was pretty clearly, I had some fantastic games of the Uber Artifact Cube against listener to the show, Ellis. We had this wild board state. It was really grindy. She ended up casting an Acquire and stealing the Mer Battlesphere out of my deck, had it in play. I already had...
Was this the 5 activations of Crystal Shard game?
Exactly, yeah. So I had a Crystal Shard and a Phyrexian Metamorph cloning the Crystal Shard, and so I had to, on the end of her turn, activate both Crystal Shards to tap to get rid of 2 mana. It was just a game of using all the mana, and then 2 more, and then sacrificing it to KCI, and then buying it back with Buried Ruin. Is that the land that lets you buy back? I had just enough mana to activate it 5 times to end up bouncing the Mirror Battlesphere back to my hand, and then cast it next turn. And it was just a really fun,
there was a lot going on
slow
in that game.
matchup where there was a lot going on, and it was all about finding the one line that could get me through that. So that was great. I lost, but it was cool.
I gotta say, I'm just gonna keep it real. I think the highlight for me was just getting to spend time with all the fellas.
Look at you,
bonding with friends. No,
So-
I knew it was.
so,
I knew it was either
heartwarming.
gonna. I knew it was either gonna bring us all closer, or or
Big
be,
or
be awkward,
drop you off in the
and
van at 11
weird
p.m. and say, "See you never, Patrick."
and uncomfortable. No, it was a really nice time. I played Magic better than Anthony did. I played Super Smash Brothers better than Daniel did. It was great. It was great for me.
All true points, I can attest.
For me, it was definitely in the third draft of the first day, which was the Old Border Foil Cube, and it was the feature draft, and I ended up playing Sam Black in the finals on coverage, which was pretty exciting. And I drafted this mono red burn ball lightning deck basically, and I beat Sam 2-0. Both games I killed him on actually the first game he managed to cast Ravenous Baloth 3 times and gained 12 life. But
Not what the mono red deck wants to see, but you still got there.
I still managed to get there with Hammer of Begarden returning to my hand twice, I
I
believe.
played a lot of Hammer of Begarden. It was in both my decks of the Old Border Foil
Yeah.
Cube.
No, that card is really good.
Way more relevant
Yep.
to buy that thing
Yep.
back than you would expect. It comes up.
So that was pretty exciting. I was his first loss of the tournament. He almost went 9-0, but I stopped him.
Lost very few other
Yep.
matches the whole
Yep.
tournament.
Got his ass.
So for me, it was actually before the tournament actually began. I brought the Reading Rainbow Cube that I have with me. I didn't have enough time to submit it as a possible cube to be drafted with the regular event, but I brought it with me just in case somebody wanted to check it out. And I had a pot of 8 people be like, "Oh, is yours the Pillars Cube? Oh my gosh, let's play that."
Your cube's name, your reputation precedes it,
Yeah. And then right after that cube was done, another group of 8 people was like, "Hey, they just finished it. Can we use it then afterwards?"
You just walked in and handed your cube over to a bunch of strangers and went and did something else while they drafted your cube, and it was so delightful to see this big giant smile on your face.
It was wonderful. I truly did not expect it to be that well received. But it really just shows that you really can make a cube however you want it. It is the kind of thing that you can make it yourself in your own. And I just really, really loved that people enjoyed my vision for what the cube was.
It just so happens that your way is also pretty fun.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
You're a fun guy.
Yeah. Turn to any one drop you want. Sorry, other way around. Turn
What?
1. Turn
What
1.
are you talking about?
Sorry, backwards. Turn 1. Any 2 drop you want.
Nailed it.
First time, every time.
The highlight for me, it was great to meet all the listeners we got to meet. That was really fun. I got to play a lot of games against you. I can't name you all, but if you met me, you know that I met you, and I was excited to do so. There was a lot of them. I don't know. I couldn't remember all the names. But so that was really fun and definitely a highlight. It's nice to actually see the human beings that are listening to the show more than just have them be a little string of text on a screen saying cool episode, but you got this line of rules text wrong. To actually meet everybody in person was really nice. But
To get that live feedback about the rules text you got wrong.
Exactly, yeah. The other thing that was really highlight for me is I got to do some coverage this weekend, which was really fun, and I had a great time doing it. It was just I don't know, everything I wanted it to be. I watched my VODs already and have a lot of feedback for myself. I can do even better next time, but really fun to get to be in the booth with Justin Parnell, and so you should watch those videos. We'll put links to the VODs on Twitch. At some point, they're going to be on YouTube as well. Whenever they are, I'll retroactively update the show notes to put the links to YouTube there also. But I ended up being at totally different times than I said on the podcast. So if you tuned in Friday night, sorry, I was not doing coverage then. I ended up doing it Thursday afternoon and Saturday morning, but That was really fun. Also, I got Gwen Decker to, play like a clown with his cards all over the place. He had a Mystic Forge that was really important for his deck, and there were like name placards or like, number placards in every table, like a little like, metal sign with a base that said table 204 or whatever. And Gwen, after confirming with the judge this was legal, put his Mystic Forge like rested on the like base, so that if I tried to flip a card onto the Mystic Forge, it would probably hit the actual placard first. He like protected his card basically by playing it on the base. Normal Magic stuff.
So he
really enjoyed it.
So he gave it protection from Chaos Orb?
Something like that, yeah.
Real quick, fellas, can we end it with a group Hachi Machi?
Y'all got to get in close if you want it to be all on the mic. You got to get intimate and get in there, Daniel. You can count us down?
3, 2, 1.
Hachi Machi!
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for bringing your unique brand of energy to this podcast episode, Patrick. That is it for this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. All of our music is produced by DJ James Nasty. All the magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. The show is produced by us just hitching our wagon to Patrick's charisma and riding into success. Thanks for crowding into my little podcast studio in my basement, boys. This has been a joy, and I can't wait for CubeCon next year.